Every day, families in London and across the UK find themselves unable to afford their rent, and a growing number are losing their homes as a result.
It's hard, it's a struggle, and if we're living like this, it's because we really got no choice, you know.
We looked at data released by the government and found there's been a 6% rise in homelessness in the past 2 years.
Homelessness isn't inevitable, it's predictable. It's predictable when you cut benefits to the extent that this government and the last government cut them, the coalition and the current government.
Evidence suggests this rise is linked to the government's welfare reforms, specifically the reduction in housing benefits provided to those living in private properties who need a hand with the rent. This benefit is known as the local housing allowance.
The LHA cap is one of the aspects of welfare reform, welfare cuts, which has had the most profound impact on homelessness, particularly in London and the south.
Put in place by Labour in 2008, the local housing allowance, or LHA, helped cover the cost of rent for people struggling to make ends meet. Then, in 2011, the coalition government capped LHA at 30% of market rate in any given region. Finally, in 2015, the Conservative government froze housing benefits for 4 years, meaning they would no longer rise with inflation.
We will legislate to freeze working age benefits for 4 years. That will include tax credits and local housing allowance, and it means earnings growth will catch up and overtake the growth in benefits.
More and more people are finding they simply cannot find houses where their rent is covered by the housing benefit offered by the government, especially in London. We analysed the local cap alongside average private rental prices and found out just how far housing benefits lag behind. Inner London boroughs are where the gap is biggest. In many areas, the LHA fell short of market rent for a single room by at least £200 a month. Westminster is the worst hit, with a £327 shortfall. Even in Greater London, the differences were significant. For a 3-bedroom home, we found that in every single borough, benefits fell short of market prices. Members of government who have been campaigning for policy reform for years understand which members of society are the hardest hit.
Single mother, the mother who is dependent on housing benefit, hasn't got any other kind of income, won't be able to pay the rent. So she's the one that suffers, and her children.
We went to Barkingside to meet Natalie, a single mother of 3, who's deemed in priority need by the council. She's not on the streets, but is unable to rent privately with the benefits she's offered. Her family live in a single room in a hostel.
My local housing allowance is £150 a week, a week, where I don't even think a 1-bedroom, or maybe a 1-bedroom flat might, if you're lucky, just come into that. But I doubt it in London somehow. Can't afford it, it's impossible. I've looked, just to get my kids out of the hostel. It's unaffordable.
The Crisis Homelessness Monitor released its most recent report at an event at the British Medical Association this month. It studies the impacts of economic and policy developments on homelessness in England. Professor Suzanne Fitzpatrick, a specialist in homelessness and housing policy, co-authored the report.
So what we've seen is a massive increase in the number of homeless households where the reason for their homelessness is that a private landlord has ended their tenancy.
Almost 11 months ago, we were moved into a homeless hostel because the landlord wanted the property back. It's really tough. It's not a nice place. It's me, 3 boys in 1 room.
Private landlords are reluctant to rent to people on benefits. You can see this just by scrolling through ads on Gumtree. These ads for properties to rent in London all have one thing in common: no DSS, again and again. This stands for no Department of Social Security. In other words, no benefit claimants. Our analysis showed that there is one main reason why people are pushed out of their homes and into temporary accommodation. the end of an assured short-hold tenancy agreement.
The assured short-hold tenancy is the form of tenure that most private sector tenants in England have, and basically what that means is the landlord offers a tenancy for at least 6 months, and then after that time the landlord can ask the tenant to leave, regardless of whether the tenant's done anything wrong.
Eviction by private landlords is the main cause of homelessness in the UK.
The LHA cap is stopping landlords receiving the rent they used to get for people who can't pay the rent out of their own pocket, people who are dependent on housing benefit. The landlord is going to get less rent, so the landlord doesn't want those people to come into his or her properties.
So you can't really blame the landlords. They're doing what any business person would do, and they've got to. They're answerable to the banks if they don't pay the mortgage. It's the government's fault.
Looking at our data, it's clear that there was a major shift in 2011. In 2011, the government launched the Welfare Reform Bill, capping the allowance. We put our evidence to the Department of Work and Pensions. They responded.
This government is committed to an affordable private rental market that works for tenants and landlords. We are increasing LHA rates in areas with high rent rises benefiting 700,000 households. Meanwhile, our housing white paper sets out how we'll build more homes for rent and make sure renting remains affordable for working families.
However, Lord Best believes that the government's handling of the housing benefit cap has been misguided.
With the private rental sector, you've got to keep it in line with the market. You can't buck the whole market. You're too big for your boots if you think that your bit of the market, you can dictate what rents will be. No, the wider world will dictate that, and the LHA levels have got to keep pace with that. They've got to hit the market numbers, or landlords will simply say no. The great hope is the government has finally woken up to the fact that we need to build a lot more homes. Because if you've got plenty of homes, if there's enough to go round, an awful lot of other things fall into place.